So we all kind of know that we should know the fingerboard better, right? It's a very guitar player kind of thing to be like, well, I know the open strings and I kind of get how notes add on top of each other, but like once I get up here, like I don't know what's going on. And we all kind of walk around feeling like, that's something I should really work on. That would probably help. But without really knowing why it would help, it's hard to get motivated. So in this lesson, I'm going to explain 3 really good reasons for learning the fingerboard a little bit better. And then I want to give you one super easy way to start working on it that you can start working on today when you sit down and practice. Okay, so the first reason to know the fingerboard better is that it will let you use the same stuff in more than one place. If you know a lick in E and you understand the fingerboard, you know that, oh, this is like the root and the third and the fifth and sixth and root of an E chord. Oh, well, if I want to go up the neck, there's the same stuff. And it's over here. You know, if you know where the roots and thirds and fifths of a chord are, then you can take that information and anywhere else you can find that chord, you can put it there. And that leads to the second thing that knowing the fretboard will let you do, which is you can move things from key to key. So whether that's, well, I know this song in E and it sounds great here, but I want to play it in another key like A. And if you've got this arrangement that's based on playing certain chord shapes, you can sometimes even start to find new places on the guitar to play stuff just based on taking the intervals that you know you're doing and moving them around. And that goes even more so for certain kinds of improvising where you can find your way through a chord progression if you're thinking in terms of, oh, I know these shapes, right? But I also know that these are roots and thirds and fifths and sevenths. And you can translate that from shape to shape based on the interval. And that means that anytime you're playing something like that, you can then say, oh, well, if this is the seventh over here, and right, just by using that knowledge of what part of the chord you're playing, you can expand and take one idea and get a whole lot more mileage out of it. And then, as if it wasn't necessarily clear from those 2 points, the third thing about knowing the fingerboard better is knowing the fingerboard is what makes theory real. Like you can sit and learn like what the notes of a Dorian scale are, or how, you know, the chords of how the notes of a 5 chord relate to the home key. But until you've mapped it out on the guitar and heard what it sounds like and used it to play something for yourself, it just remains theoretical, right? It's theory. When you start to map it out on the guitar based on understanding where the intervals are on the fingerboard for what you're doing, how they stand in relation to the chords you're playing or the chords you're playing over, that's when theory stops just feeling theoretical and starts to feel like hands-on, usable material for really playing the kind of music that you want to play. So here's the exercise we're going to do. And it's kind of dumb how simple it is. Maybe in the intro I should have said not that it was easy, but that it was simple. Because applying it, there are lots of different ways you can apply this. But the idea itself is just to play through triads on the fingerboard and say the name of the interval you're playing while you play it. That's it. Now, the details of how to do that, we can get into a few different ways to do it to make it sort of a little more logical and a little easier to practice. But the basic idea is, let's say you were playing on the top 3 strings and you were playing on an E chord, you would have these shapes, right? Those are the triad shapes of an E chord as you go up the top 3 strings. And so as you play each note one by one, you would say what interval it was relative to the root, right? This root here. So third, fifth, root, fifth, root, third, root, third, fifth, third, fifth, root. Now that right there is plenty if you don't actually really know those triads yet. And there are two things about this that need to happen. First, you need to somehow acquire those fingerings to know that they're there. And then you need to stop and really think relative to the root. What are those notes? And you can start by just counting up from the root of the scale, like just thinking do, re, mi in your head or out loud. If this is the first note, well, here we are on the third note, the fifth note, and then back to the root. Same thing here. Here's the root, here's the fifth, here's the root, here's the third and the fifth, and so on. So that's really the whole thing. It's just to start matching what you're playing with what you're thinking and making that connection real by saying it out loud. The one other thing you can add to the mix, and I recommend adding to the mix, is doing this with a metronome. Because this is an exercise not for these guys, right? Because it's not hard to play these, especially once you actually know the shapes. What's hard is making that connection, like hardwiring the connection between the name of the interval, which is going on up here, and the physical location you are on the fingerboard, which is going on down here. So just like you practice technique with a metronome, you want to practice this kind of technique with a metronome so that you have to arrive with your speech and your fingers and your brain all at the same time. So that you can say third, fifth, root, third, root, third, fifth, third, fifth, root. And then you want to make it harder? Go backwards. Root, fifth, third, root, fifth, right? And then maybe go backwards from the top down. So starting on the lower string, third string, but starting up here. So third, fifth, root, third, fifth, root, right? There's a million things you could do. And all I've done so far is one triad on the top three strings. So you can imagine where this could go. But that's the idea. And most important of all, this is not something to spend a ton of time on. This is a warm-up, right? So if like your main thing is to go for a 20-minute run, you don't spend 40 minutes warming up, right? At least I don't, So if you're going to practice for half an hour, spend at most 5 or 10 minutes on this, maybe just 5 minutes. And this is a slow burn. It's one of those things, if you fold this into your practicing and start doing a little bit of it with the metronome, keeping track of what you're working on, you will slowly, over the course of time, start to get this map under your fingers and into your head where wherever you are, whatever you're playing, you're going to just not even be thinking, but just be aware of what the interval is relative to the root. And that is going to really start to unlock things for you on the guitar. Now, one way to organize what part of the fingerboard or what kind of voicings or what key you're going to focus on first is to tie it to whatever song you're working on at the time. So for instance, inside my membership, the Fingerstyle 5, if we're working on a steady bass song in the key of E, we're going to work on finding intervals and note names up the neck in the key of E. We move on to doing something in like drop D, then it'll be time to think about intervals and note names in drop D. So each month when I introduce the material for that month's song, talk about ways to set up your practicing for the month as well, so that you can have this integrated experience where you're working on a song, you're working on learning the fingerboard, you're working on all kinds of important like rhythmic rudiments so that your thumb and fingers are starting to get more coordinated as well in a way where all that practice material is targeted around whatever song you're working on at the time. So if that's something you'd like to learn more about, you can go over to my website, fretboardconfidential.com, to learn more and sign up. Next month in January, we're going to be working on a contemporary blues tune on a one-chord vamp. I actually played an example of that tune on the way into today's lesson. So again, you can check that all out. If you've got a question or a comment about today's lesson here, I would love to hear from you. Please leave it in the comments down below. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.